What if I told you that everything you believed in was a lie? We are accustomed to seeing the Gilded Age as a time of endless balls, rustling silks, and happy marriages concluded in the glittering halls of New York and London mansions. However, behind the facades of these magnificent buildings lay a very different reality, full of silence, suppressed sighs, and destinies broken by the cruel rules of propriety. For thousands of women of that time, the glitter of chandeliers and the clink of crystal were merely a backdrop to their personal tragedy, which society referred to with the hurtful term, old maid. They lived in luxurious homes, but did not even have the right to their own room, remaining eternal guests in the lives of their more fortunate sisters and brothers. Their fate was predetermined not by their talents or personal qualities, but only by the absence of a ring on their ring finger, which automatically made them second-class citizens. The story of these women is a chronicle of invisible tears shed into pillows and the pride they had to maintain while wearing dresses from past seasons. It is a story of how society turned a single woman into a convenient shadow, obliged to serve others and forget her own desires and dreams. We will walk through the cold corridors of their lives to see what their everyday life was like, deprived of the right to personal happiness. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the financial noose tightened around the neck of an unmarried woman forced her to thank fate even for the most meager food and a roof over her head. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a luxurious mansion became a prison? The worst thing for an unmarried woman in the Victorian era was the loss of her physical space and right to privacy. As soon as a girl passed a certain age, she ceased to be a daughter of marriageable age and became a poor relative whose presence in the house was tolerated only out of kindness. Her cozy maiden bedroom was often given to growing nieces or guests, and she herself was moved to a small, poorly heated room somewhere under the roof or in a side wing. The furniture there was old, assembled from different sets that were no longer suitable for the formal rooms of the house. In winter, the water in the wash basin in such rooms was covered with a thin crust of ice, and the woman had to wrap herself in shawls just to keep warm. The windows often overlooked the farmyard or the blank wall of the neighboring house, depriving her even of a view of the busy street. This relocation was a symbolic act. Society and the family showed the woman her new, insignificant place in the hierarchy of the house. She had to be grateful even for this corner, because the alternative was complete poverty and a workhouse. Her day began early, but not with her own affairs, but with carrying out the orders of the mistress of the house, usually her brother's wife or a more fortunate sister. She went down to breakfast, trying to be inconspicuous, took the most uncomfortable seat at the table, and listened silently to conversations about other people's lives. She was not allowed to have her own opinion if it contradicted that of the head of the family who supported her. In the living room, she always chose the armchair in the farthest corner, away from the fireplace, so as not to disturb the hosts and their guests enjoying the warmth. These monotonous movements with the needle helped to hide her inner tension and created the appearance of useful activity. Guests often did not even notice her presence, discussing the news in front of her as if she were part of the furniture or interior. She was deprived of the right to invite friends over or host parties, as this required expenses and approval from the owners of the house. Her social circle narrowed to other lonely women whom she could only meet at church or charity gatherings. Any attempt to show initiative or express her desires was perceived as ingratitude and capriciousness. She was constantly reminded that she was living at someone else's expense and had to earn her keep through obedience and modesty. But even in this oppressed position, women found ways to preserve their dignity and inner peace. They read books, secretly studied languages or botany, finding solace in knowledge that no one could take away from them. Their inner lives were richer and deeper than those around them, who considered them empty and boring, could imagine. Behind the mask of obedience often lay a sharp mind and keen observation, which noticed all the vices and weaknesses of the surrounding society. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about living as a permanent guest in your own home? Write about it in the comments. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us back to the accounting books of that era? Financial dependence was the invisible but strong rope that tied an unmarried woman tightly to her family. In an era when there were virtually no decent jobs for ladies, Not having a husband meant having no means of support whatsoever. Inheritance laws often gave the lion's share of property to sons, leaving daughters with only a modest dowry or a small annual allowance. This allowance, or pension, was often so meager that it was only enough for the bare necessities: needles, thread, postage stamps, and the occasional wardrobe update. Women had no control over their capital. They received money from their fathers and then their brothers, each time feeling the humiliation of being a supplicant. Any attempt to earn money independently was met with harsh condemnation from society and could cast a shadow on the reputation of the entire family. Working as a governess or companion was considered a last resort, a sign that the father or brother could not provide for their women. A lady could only engage in charity or the arts, but these activities did not generate income and only required new expenses. Thus, the circle was complete. She could not work because she was a lady, and she could not be an independent lady because she had no money. Fear of the future was a constant companion for such a woman, especially when her parents grew old and passed away. She dreaded the moment when she would become completely dependent on the goodwill of her brother and his wife. Daughters-in-law often saw their sisters-in-law as a burden, an extra expense, and a source of irritation in the home. Conflicts over money were hidden but poisonous, poisoning the atmosphere at the family table. Financial powerlessness bred a deep sense of insecurity and worthlessness. She saw her married friends discussing shopping, home improvements, and travel, while she could not even afford a new hat. Money was not just a means of payment, it was the equivalent of freedom, which she did not have. But even more frightening than the lack of money was how society explained her loneliness by attributing non-existent ailments to her. In the next chapter, you will learn what diagnoses were given to women simply because they were alone. I discovered this by accident while studying medical treatises from the late 19th century. It turns out that a woman's unmarried status was often viewed by doctors of that era not as a social circumstance, but as a medical pathology requiring treatment. It was believed that a woman's body and psyche could not function normally without fulfilling their natural purpose, marriage and motherhood. A single woman was automatically placed in a risk group, and any ailment she had, whether it was a headache or a bad mood, was attributed to her abnormal situation. Unmarried women were often sent to sanatoriums for the waters, not so much for treatment as to remove them from the home during the season or family celebrations. They're surrounded by other lonely sufferers. They drank mineral water, walked in parks, and discussed their symptoms. This created the illusion of care, but in reality, it was a form of soft exile. Women felt superfluous, cut off from active life. Even the natural processes of aging in unmarried women were viewed more critically and harshly. Menopause, referred to as the critical age, was considered a dangerous period when a woman could finally lose her mind. Doctors prescribed strict regimes and supervision, as if they were dealing with criminals rather than human beings. This fear of female physiology permeated the entire culture of the Victorian era. If you are moved by the tragic fate of these women who became hostages to the medical ignorance of their time, please like this video. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a person can disappear in a crowded room? For an unmarried woman over the age of 25, the ballroom was transformed from a place of triumph to a place of public execution. She no longer received invitations to dance, her card remained empty, and she was forced to sit by the wall, watching the young couples whirl around. She was called a withered flower or a wallflower, and these nicknames hurt her pride. Etiquette prescribed strict rules of conduct for women whose marriageable age had passed. She was forbidden to wear light, pastel colors intended for young debutantes. Her lot was dark, heavy fabrics, closed styles, and an absence of flirty details. She had to dress as if she had already crossed the threshold of old age, even though she was only 30. Social conversations also became a minefield where every question could cause pain. Married ladies discussed husbands, children, and housekeeping, topics in which she could not participate as an equal. When she tried to talk about books, art, or the news, she was met with polite confusion or condescension. Her opinion carried no weight because she had not fulfilled the main mission of a woman, which meant she understood nothing about real life. It was especially painful to see her younger sisters or even nieces get married and immediately rise above her in the social hierarchy. The girl she had taught to embroider yesterday now looked down on her and gave her advice. This reversal, when age did not confer authority and status determine everything, was a bitter pill to swallow. Even in church, the only place where everyone should be equal before God, social invisibility made itself felt. Single women often sat in separate groups or in the back pews. Their piety was taken for granted as the only consolation available to people like them. No one saw this as deep faith, but rather as an attempt to fill the void in their lives. Invisibility became second nature, a defensive reaction to the indifference of the world. Women learned to move silently, speak quietly, and not attract attention. They erased themselves from the space so as not to interfere with others' brilliance. But inside this shadow lived a passionate heart, thirsting for recognition and love. Have you ever wondered how these women filled their days when the lights of the ballroom went out? The answer will surprise you with its ordinariness and heaviness. The life of an unmarried woman inside the house was filled with endless, monotonous work that no one noticed or appreciated. She was not a mistress who gave orders, but she was not a servant who received a salary either. She was stuck in a strange intermediate position, performing the duties of a housekeeper, secretary, and nurse at the same time. It was she who was responsible for caring for her aging parents. She read the newspaper aloud to her father, whose eyesight was failing, spent hours untangling her mother's knitting, and wrote endless letters to distant relatives as they dictated. It was work that required enormous patience and self-sacrifice. She could not show fatigue or irritation because it was her sacred duty. Parents often became capricious and demanding, perceiving their daughter as their property, as a living crutch for their old age. Caring for sick relatives was another unspoken duty. If someone in the house fell ill, it was the unmarried aunt or sister who had to keep vigil at their bedside, change compresses, administer medicine, and listen to complaints. Sleepless nights, the smell of camphor and medicine, quiet footsteps in the hallway. That was her life. She became the guardian angel of the house, but this angel had tired eyes and a sore back. The organization of household affairs also often fell on her. She made sure that the laundry was washed and starched on time, that there were enough supplies in the pantry, and that the servants did not slack off. But all the glory for the perfectly organized reception went to the mistress of the house, while the old maid remained in the shadows, checking that there were enough cutlery for everyone. Her work was the foundation on which the comfort of the whole family rested. Holidays were the busiest time of year for her. While others were having fun, she made sure the punch was hot, the candles weren't smoking, and all the guests were getting enough attention. She was the director of other people's fun, staying behind the scenes. And when the guests left, she was the one who helped clean up after the party. Quiet evenings by the fireplace were filled not with romance, but with a sense of life passing her by. She would stare into the fire and think about how her youth was burning away just as irretrievably, leaving no warmth for her. But even in this routine, there were small joys. A successful embroidery project, a rare letter from an old friend, a flower blooming on the windowsill. But sometimes women found a way out of this vicious circle by joining forces with each other. In the next chapter, you will learn how female friendship became a lifeline and a challenge to society. Ready to find out what happens behind closed doors when two women decide to challenge loneliness? At the end of the 19th century, a phenomenon arose that society called Boston marriages. It was a union of two unmarried women who decided to live together, run a joint household, and support each other emotionally and financially. It was a quiet rebellion against a system that condemned them to dependence on male relatives. Such unions allowed women to find a home where they were full-fledged mistresses. They could choose their own furniture, plan their own menus, and invite guests who interested them. For the first time in their lives, they had their own space, not controlled by their father or brother. This gave them an incredible sense of freedom and dignity. They pooled their modest funds to rent a decent apartment or a small house where they could live by their own rules. Society viewed such couples with suspicion and curiosity. People whispered about their unnatural attachment and made assumptions, but often had to admit that these women led quite respectable lives. Women in such unions were often intellectuals, writers, artists, or social activists. They created a special world around themselves, filled with books, art, and deep conversations that were inaccessible in ordinary social salons. Together, they could travel without intrusive accompaniment, as the two ladies could easily look after each other. They discovered the world, visiting Italy, France, and Switzerland, enjoying beauty and freedom. These trips were a breath of fresh air, an opportunity to shed the mask of primness and simply be themselves. Their albums contain photographs taken against the backdrop of the Alps or Roman ruins, evidence of happy moments. The emotional support in such unions was tremendous. The women understood each other at a glance, shared joys and sorrows, and cared for each other during illness. It was the very partnership that they were deprived of due to the absence of marriage. They became a family for each other, one they had chosen themselves, not one imposed by fate. Boston marriages were the prototype of modern women's emancipation. It was an attempt to create an alternative life scenario where respect and friendship were placed above social conventions. These women paved the way for future generations, showing that happiness does not necessarily depend on having a husband. How difficult do you think it was to take such a step at a time when any deviation from the norm was punished by ostracism? In the next chapter, we will talk about how restrictions shackled their every step outside the home. For an unmarried woman, the outside world was full of invisible walls and barriers. She could not simply go out on the street and go wherever she wanted without risking her reputation. The institution of chaperones and escorts was a strict overseer, controlling her every move. Appearing on the street alone, especially in the evening, was tantamount to falling from grace. Even a simple trip to the library or museum required an escort. If a woman did not have the money to hire a companion, she had to ask a relative or servant to go with her. This turned any outing into a complex logistical operation, dependent on the willingness and free time of others. Often, she preferred to stay at home rather than humiliate herself with requests. Traveling alone was practically impossible. A woman could not stay in a good hotel without being accompanied by a man or another older woman. She would be viewed as a woman of easy virtue. Restaurants and cafes were also risky places. A lady could not dine alone in a public place. She had access only to special tea rooms for ladies, where the menu was modest and the atmosphere boring. Communication with men was strictly regulated. An unmarried woman could not correspond with a gentleman unless they were engaged or related. Any private conversation, even in a corner of a ballroom, could become a source of gossip. She lived under the constant scrutiny of strangers' eyes judging her morality. Her world was reduced to her neighborhood, her church, and a few familiar houses. The vast, bustling, changing city lived its own life, while she watched it from her window or from behind her companion's shoulder. She was a prisoner of conventions invented by people long dead, but whose rules continued to govern the living. These restrictions were suffocating, causing feelings of claustrophobia and powerlessness. The woman felt like a bird in a cage, seeing the sky but unable to spread her wings. Every step required permission, every action required consideration of the opinions of those around her. But even in this cage, women found a way to travel. Through the pages of books and the lines of letters, we will talk about this secret world in the next chapter. When the outside world closed its doors to them, unmarried women opened the doors to their inner world with the help of pen and paper. Letters, diaries, and literary experiments became their only outlet, a space of absolute freedom where no one could judge them. In the silence of their rooms, they created universes where they were the main characters, beloved, courageous, and independent. The epistolary genre reached its peak in the Victorian era thanks to women. In letters to friends or sisters, they could be sincere, share their doubts, discuss books they had read, and even cautiously criticize social norms. These letters were true literary works, full of subtle observations, irony, and deep feelings. They replaced the lively communication that was so sorely lacking. Diaries became silent confidants. They were entrusted with secrets that were too frightening to even think about aloud. On their yellowed pages, we find traces of real drama, unrequited love, anger at family injustice, fear of loneliness. These were cries from the soul, captured in elegant calligraphic handwriting. Often, women bequeathed their diaries to be destroyed after their death, as if afraid that even their descendants would not understand their pain. Poetry was especially close to the female soul. In rhyming lines, it was possible to veil one's feelings, to make them sublime and beautiful. Albums with handwritten poems were kept as the greatest treasures. It was their secret treasure trove of beauty amid the gray everyday life. It is in these papers, covered with small handwriting, that the true history of Victorian women has been preserved. Not in official documents, but in these living testimonies of the mind and heart, which did not break under the pressure of circumstances. They wrote in order not to go mad, to prove to themselves that they existed. This intellectual labor was an invisible feat. While the family believed that their aunt was simply scribbling on paper, she was creating her own world, immune to criticism. Ink was her blood, and paper was her flesh. However, as the years passed, her fear of the future grew stronger. What awaited them when the pen fell from her weakening hands? The worst nightmare of any unmarried woman without a significant fortune was the prospect of a poverty-stricken old age. While her parents were alive, her situation was relatively stable. But with their passing, her world was falling apart. If her brother was unwilling or unable to support her, if the inheritance was squandered or non-existent, she was faced with an abyss. Gentlemanly poverty was a special kind of suffering. A woman from a good family could not go to work in a factory or a shop. It would be an indelible disgrace. She had to huddle in cheap boarding houses, sell family jewels and clothes at bargain prices, and skimp on food and coal. She maintained outward appearances, clean gloves, proud posture, but often went hungry in the literal sense of the word. She became dependent on charity from distant relatives or former family friends. These handouts were humiliating, reminding her each time of her fall from grace. Old dresses were altered for the 10th time. Hats were updated with ribbons found in trunks. The cold in the unheated room became a constant companion on her winter evenings. The specter of the workhouse hung over every single woman. It was a place where a person lost the last remnants of dignity, turning into a powerless unit of labor. To end up there meant social death. Women were willing to endure any hardship to avoid this fate. Fear of the workhouse made them cling to the slightest opportunity to remain among decent people. This fear made women submissive and quiet. They were afraid to draw attention to themselves, lest they irritate those on whom their lives depended. They became shadows while still alive, disappearing from the memory of those around them. Old age for an unmarried woman was a test of strength of spirit. Maintaining human dignity in conditions of poverty and loneliness was a real feat, and many of them performed this feat every day until the very end. And what remained after them? Only faded photographs in old albums. If you open an old Victorian family album, you are sure to see them. Women with stern faces, dressed in dark dresses, standing slightly apart from the main group, happy parents and children. These are aunts, cousins, sisters, whose names are often not even written on the back of the card. They look at us through time with a calm, slightly sad gaze, as if knowing that their story will be forgotten. The legacy of these women has dissolved into the history of their families. They left no direct descendants to preserve their memory. Their belongings were given away or thrown away, their letters burned as useless junk. The rooms in which they lived for decades were immediately occupied by new tenants, erasing all traces of their presence. They left quietly without slamming the door, just as they had lived. But if you look closely, their traces can be found everywhere. In embroidered tablecloths that are still kept in grandma's chests, in pie recipes neatly copied into cookbooks, in the upbringing of nephews who became great people thanks to the loving aunt who taught them to read and dream. Their contribution was woven into the fabric of everyday life, invisible but enduring. They were the keepers of family traditions and secrets. They remembered the birthdays of all their second cousins, knew who married whom, and who was buried where. With their passing, the ties between the branches of the family were broken, and the living memory of generations was lost. They were the glue that held large, ramified clans together. Memory is the only thing we can give them back. Give them back their names, give them back their significance, give them back their right to be the main characters, at least in our story. We have touched on the secret lives of Victorian women, whose fates were hidden behind thick curtains of propriety. Their story is a reminder of how easily society can devalue a person by labeling them. But it is also a story of incredible inner strength, of the ability to maintain dignity and find meaning in life even in the most constrained circumstances. They did not take to the streets with placards, but their daily struggle with loneliness and dependence was their personal revolution. What character traits do you think helped these women survive in the golden cage of their time? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments section. What other forgotten pages of women's history would you like to learn about? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can uncover the secrets of the past together.